Hey guys, welcome to YesUsers, the podcast that explores the journey of tech innovators and marketing gurus. I'm your host Avinash, and today our guest is Ben Hoehn. Here are the highlights of the
Yeah,
podcast.
I'm Ben Hoehn. I am a marketer with a passion for education and fitness, really, in a nutshell. I've been doing some form of marketing for over 20 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about. I started as a developer back in the late 90s, then pivoted into building front-end programs, and then pivoted into figuring out how to get more eyeballs in those programs. I'm a little bit warm. We're having a heat wave in California, but other than that, I'm good.
No, I can understand. I'm right now in New Delhi, and trust me,
Yeah,
I can
I can't talk. You guys have a lot more heat than we do.
understand.
But between now and then, what I have been doing is volunteer educating. So I was able to connect with a great organization called Junior Achievement. I'm sure some folks out there have heard it. It provides financial literacy for a bunch of different schools. So I was able to connect with them, get their materials, and then scratch that itch just by doing volunteer education in a ton of different schools. I live in the Bay Area, so there's no shortage of schools for me to teach at. I was working on a project that was a massive like e-commerce overhaul. It was a seven-figure project. I had an offshore team. I had an onshore team that I'd hired, and we were just like rolling a stone up a hill. Every person in the org, especially if you're not huge yet, needs to know all of the customers, needs to at least know your top 10 customers, who they are, how they feel, what their needs are. I've read before, and I really believe in this, that at that stage, all of the founders and even product owners and anyone in the C-suite, if you have one at that point, they should be touching the customers once a week, just staying on the phone with them or saying, hey, can you get on a call? Can we just walk through everything? Tell me more about how you discovered us. Tell me more about the problems that you're looking to solve. And then through that dialogue and maybe your first 20, 50 or whatever customers it takes, you will kind of determine your product market fit from there, or at least you'll come away. And now VFX is in everything. Every single film has VFX. Every television series has VFX. Indie films, documentaries, all this stuff, there's some element of VFX that goes into it. So they're either doing monsters and aliens and robots or zombies, or the background that's happening in any scene. I started to get into the mindset because I had a lot of just really crappy kind of managers in a row. I got into the mindset of, okay, these people are teaching me what not to do. So I began to cobble together what my leadership was going to be like with that mindset, where I was like, okay, I'm sitting under someone or I'm working with someone that just isn't good and I know it. I'm going to isolate what I really don't like about it. And then I'm going to do the opposite when I get my chance. And that, maybe I just rationalized it. Maybe that was just me, trying to get to a gritty place where I could push through it, but it did kind of get me through. I was kind of just collecting an observance and saying like, okay, I'm not going to do that when I get my chance. These guys did. They pivoted into monetizing their AI tools that they'd already developed. They'd hired some brilliant machine learning researchers and professors that are actually teaching machine learning at some prominent universities. And a lot of shortcuts that they were taking with VFX, where they'd have to render just thousands of shots to de-age someone or render thousands of shots to try and do a better lip sync. They're like, well, what if we made a tool from this? And what if we added it to our tool set? Then what if we just started selling it? And these are now startup ideas. I had read something really interesting where one company had like this club where people would share their biggest failures, like during like a lunch and learn or something like that. And it bonded everyone because everyone has like one major like embarrassing story. At least it could be in school, could be at work, doesn't matter. But like sharing that failure that a lot of people keep as a secret, like really bonds people because you're like, oh my God, I did that too, or that's my worst nightmare or something, right? Like they ended up forming a club where people would just share their stories. And it stayed in the room, of the other people, but they became like lifelong friends through it. And these were just people at work, and I'm not sure who came up with it, where I read it, but if you're looking for a bonding experience, especially over Zoom, try that one.
As you just heard, from his early days as a developer to becoming a go-to market strategist and fractional CMO, Ben's story is one of adaptability, continuous learning, and finding passion in unexpected places. Get ready for an insightful conversation that spans the world of marketing education, visual effects, and the delicate balance of professional ambition and personal growth. So let's jump right in. So, Ben, welcome to Yes Users podcast. How are you feeling?
Feeling great. I'm a little bit warm. We're having a heat wave in California, but other than that, I'm good.
No, I can understand. I'm right now in New Delhi, and trust
Yeah,
me,
I,
I can
I can't talk. You guys have a lot more heat than we do. So
So, so Ben, let's start with your intro, right? For our listeners who don't know you, would you care to give them a brief intro of yourself?
yeah, I'm Ben Hoehn. I am a marketer with a passion for education and fitness, really. In a nutshell, I've been doing some form of marketing for over 20 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about. I started as a developer back in the late 90s, then pivoted into building front end programs, then pivoted into figuring out how to get more eyeballs in those programs. So through a combination of working with agencies, education, and then coming up through different startups, which is where I really love marketing now, I've amassed just a ton of experience around go-to-market in general.
That's interesting. So, what would you say your forte is? Is it B2C or B2B?
It's mostly B2B, I would say.
Right.
However, I've done both, and I like kind of being a hybrid. I set out to try to be like a marketer for anything, and I feel like that's the fastest way to fail, but I've also had experience doing all of them. So now I really specialize in kind of three areas. You know, one is just plugging in and being a one-man band, or someone called me an army of one on a previous webinar where I could just plug in and kind of either help build, scale, or specialize a full marketing team, a go-to-market team. The other is specializing in specific demand gen areas. My background is in demand generation, so things like optimizing digital channels, getting ABM off the ground, or spinning up a content syndication program, or specializing in an events program. Specific areas I can kind of help do. And then the third is just straight up, one-off projects. Hey, we have this new product and we just need to, think through the UX, the launch, and get to, 500,000 users in 6 months or something like that. So those are kind of the three areas that I tend to work with, that I enjoy working with. And that's how most of my engagements work at this point.
Wow, very interesting. So, one of the things I always wanted to ask someone like you is that when anybody starts their venture, they feel like, all the struggle is before they find the product market fit, right? But once they have found that, it's a smooth sailing, so on. And one of the things that I learned the hard way, that is actually not true. So what happens is that, a typical founder has found the product market fit. They were growing, but then they kind of hit a plateau, right? And I believe that's the best time for someone like you to come in and take them to the next level. So what would be your advice to founders like this? How do they determine that they need somebody like you?
It generally is right during that point, Avinash, as you nailed it. And not to date myself, but the book that everyone kind of reads with the new product is like Crossing the Chasm, right? It is a little bit dated. I think it's over 10 years old now, but it's always that plateau point where it's like, okay, we got our early adopters. How do we push through and get that next set of users? But my answer is always going to be being obsessive about customers. You should, especially when you're an early stage startup or you're just launching your product, if you feel like product market fit, you should really be obsessive about your customers. Every person in the org, especially if you're not huge yet, needs to know all of the customers, needs to at least know your top 10 customers, who they are, how they feel, what their needs are. I've read before, and I really believe in this, that at that stage, all of the founders and even product owners and anyone in the C-suite, if you have one at that point, they should be touching the customers once a week, just staying on the phone with them or saying, hey, can you get on a call? Can we just walk through everything? Tell me more about how you discovered us. Tell me more about the problems that you're looking to solve. And then through that dialogue and maybe your first 20, 50 or whatever customers it takes, you will kind of determine your product market fit from there, or at least you'll come away with, okay, we have these 3 ICPs now instead of 10 that we thought we were going to go to market with, and here are the personas, and here's what that buying committee looks like. Then from there, you call me, I can help you kind of distill that information and take things to the next level and scale. But I also enjoy that really early stage startup stuff too, where you're kind of, sitting there and you're all in one garage together almost, and everyone's kind of like, hey, over the shoulder, like, did the release go out and things like that. I really enjoy the startup life. So I like to plug in at kind of any part of that journey.
Very interesting. I completely agree. Those initial days are the best phase of,
Oh, yeah.
of any startup, right? But as you said that after that, there's so many systems that need to be put in place, right? So I see a lot of startup founders struggle in that phase, right? That, when they have, acquired most of the early adopters. So what would be your advice in terms of systems that need to be put in place, right? So we have noted out that, you need to get in touch with customers, but in terms of systems, what would be your advice?
KPIs that determine customer health. That's the fastest thing that you need to implement as soon as possible, right? And so that's different for everyone. If it's an app, it's average daily users and number of screens, number of shares, things like that. If you're building a full platform, you need to be building out the customer journey within that platform. What does the pathway to success look like? Like, what do you want them to do? And then guiding them there as much as possible. So making onboarding extremely easy. That's the first thing that needs to get flattened out. That's usually where people kind of keep deferring. They're just like, oh, we'll onboard them one by one, or we'll white glove them ad infinitum. And that's just not scalable. You can't be a 10-year-old startup and still taking, 8 or 10 weeks to onboard net new customers. It's not going to pan out. So flattening that out, determining what the customer journey looks like, and then measuring and making sure people are getting there. And then, like I said, being obsessive and like shepherding them there for that first 20 or 50 or however, whatever your first group of customers is, you need to get them there through that journey. Once you've measured that, everything else kind of falls into place. Obviously, you're looking at revenue and, a lot of the top of funnel and middle of funnel metrics for marketing and deals. But once it translates to revenue and recurring revenue, that's why everyone gets into startups, because of the ARR and the NRR factor, right? You need that recurring revenue from the legacy customers to help fund the net new acquisition or to raise funds to, add more net new customers as well.
Well said. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about because of your interest, what in your opinion is the role of social media and content creation for a B2B marketers, especially in SaaS sector?
Yeah, it's becoming everything at this point because there's
Yeah.
so much noise out there. There's kind of two main shifts that have just changed the landscape. One is Gen AI, which now anyone can, again, be in a marketing army of one. You can spin up just dozens of different blog posts, hundreds of different LinkedIn posts. Like, in an hour, you can easily clone almost any major enterprise website. It's kind of scary, but it is true. So if you think about it that way, like, anyone can look like they have like an enterprise business. So it's not just the volume of content anymore, but now the quality of content, the human curated content, and then kind of building out the connective tissue between there. So I know that doesn't seem to sound like anything substantial, but what that really means is being distinctive. Less of the old school, like, hey, let's put out a listicle article about 10 things to prime and educate my buyer. Everyone gets that stuff now, and honestly, they're asking AI all of those kind of like top of funnel education questions. Now you need to demonstrate either expertise through case studies or through interviews with your customers or through a really unique point of view or through subject matter expertise, speaking at different events and stuff like that. So that is now the role of content and social media. And your job as a marketer is not only to market yourself and throw that stuff out there, but then do that on behalf of the company that you're marketing.
Very interesting. So let's talk about Mojo Mogul, right? I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of a unique in a way that it is a company and it is your consultancy, but you mainly provide outside a fractional CMO, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Correct.
So tell us about how did you decide to go for this path?
Well, a lot of change has occurred in the marketing and MarTech industry, I'd say in the last 3 years, really. What we saw was a big shift where a lot of marketers started losing budget. There was a recession. that kind of came through it. It was almost a tech recession because the rest of the world didn't, I don't think felt it as much, but everyone in tech really did. The market got spooked. A lot of people were cut. A lot of budgets were cut. A lot of tech stack was cut. So if you're a marketer in the last few years and you're listening to this, you know you were either affected by this or you were likely directly affected by this. You lost one of those three things. So you had to do more with less. That became the fun phrase that everyone had to deal with. And every conference you went to somewhere, it was like, do more with less. And then there was just a wave of groans. So during that time, the second thing that happened was Gen AI started to come on the scene. So a lot of people really thought at this point, this summer really, that hiring and budgets and all these things would kind of unfreeze and open back up. And what we're seeing is that they're not as much. They kind of are, but it's very limited. And it's less about net new headcount and less about net new tech stack and more about bringing in either fractionals, bringing in people with expertise, or bringing in like a limited set of specialized tools. That's the gap that kind of Gen AI feels. So with those two things that really occurred, once the stint at my last company ended, I had a decision to make, either try and, jump back on a treadmill with a net new company, learn a whole new product and commit there, or say, I see what's going on. Headcount's kind of harder to come by, but this is really an opportunity for me to, deliver a lot of these things that I talked about, specializing in these different demand gen and GTM areas, and also augment everything just by learning Gen AI. So that's what I've done. And for me, I love being fractional. It's actually a lot of fun. I can plug in at, different parts. I still get that kind of startup feel that I talked about, that little dopamine rush of like getting stuff done quickly with a lot of really smart people. And I'm learning that new tools and kind of educating other people about those tools along the way.
Very interesting. So, we will talk about the Gen AI tools and, the tech side of marketing a little later.
Yeah.
So, tell me, there are a lot of people who are working as a marketer right now, full-time in a company, right? What should they be looking at if they want to become a fractional CMO in the future?
Well, first of all, the right time to jump, because I know there's a ton of people that might not want to make the leap. And living as a fractional, there is a good portion of your time that you're always having to do biz dev. So doing podcasts, networking, producing content, all of the litany of things that you have to do because you are your own business at that point. A lot of people might not want to do that, especially if you've been in-house or you're busy or, your family is a priority, things like that. And not everyone has to. It is quite a bit of work. I am weird in that I really enjoy the biz dev portion like a lot more than I thought I would. I probably meet a few amazing people like you every week and I'm like, yeah, this is fun stuff. So there's that. It's knowing that you want to do that because it is a part of the game. And if you don't enjoy it at all, probably not for you. Maybe, align yourself with someone that does like it and form your own agency if you do want to run solo. The second part is just identifying your strengths. I did go through a lot of exercises, and I was just telling a fellow fractional about this yesterday, where I did some really cheesy, like strength finding stuff with a couple of different coaches. The cheesy stuff works in my opinion, so I really did it. But then I was able to boil things down to, okay, what can I do in my sleep that I can kind of monetize, at any time from a GTM and demand gen perspective? What do I really like doing? Like what part of this process is really fun? And that's when I realized, the early stage startup stuff is my game. And then like, where do I want to grow? And there's a few other areas like through partner marketing and things like that I like to pursue. So lay that out, and then that kind of becomes your offering. So understand biz dev is part of the game and might be at least 10% of your life. And then figure out, at least 2 to 3 main deliverables that you can just do in your sleep, and then start chasing those down. And you're ready from that point.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting part is I see so many people choosing this path, but how do you convince someone, right, that they need a fractional CMO vis-a-vis a regular CMO? Because a lot of times entrepreneurs themselves don't know that it would be better for them to go for a fractional CMO or less competent full-time CMO, right? Because if the money is the main deciding factor, right? So how do you convince them that they need you?
At this point, convincing isn't really needed as much because of what I talked about before. So many businesses in the last 3 years, they cut, people, tech, resources, they took cuts. Everyone took cuts. And what I'm finding are that so many of these businesses kind of overcut, or they cut from the top and they lost a lot of their strategic expertise. Not to say anything bad about, the younger generation and net new people that are coming in, but when you cut your senior people that have been there, done that, and you have a bunch of, people that can execute really well, they still need direction, and that's where fractionals come in. What's happening now, our companies are like, oh, we don't have the headcount budget for like a full CMO, but we still need this expertise. And now there's a whole wave of fractionals out there that are saying, yeah, you can hire me to just provide strategy and maybe a little execution for, 2 days a week or something like that. And we just kind of plug in based on our specializations. So that's really the convincing, is just identifying those companies. And there are so many of them that need that help. The other thing is, you're now a line item in the budget instead of being a piece of headcount as well. So it makes the pill a little easier to swallow for them from a financial perspective.
Very interesting. So tell us about your passion for education, right? And the volunteer work that you have been doing in this area.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I really thought I was either going to be a journalist or a teacher. I was born in the 80s, and those were like the really appealing careers for me. But if you think about, just financially, where those careers end up, and especially how journalism has changed so much, and even how teaching is not given, the recognition and financial recognition really that it deserves. Once I got older, I was like, oh boy, if I want to do anything, I need to go into tech. So those passions had to, get backburnered for me. But teaching was one that never really went away. I still think that, once I retire from tech, I'm just going to go, just teach somewhere, and that'll be kind of how I close things out. But between now and then, what I have been doing is volunteer educating. So I was able to connect with a great organization called Junior Achievement. I'm sure some folks out there have heard it. It provides financial literacy for a bunch of different schools. So I was able to connect with them, get their materials, and then scratch that itch just by doing volunteer education in a ton of different schools. I live in the Bay Area, so there's no shortage of schools for me to teach at. I was also able to kind of combo some of that with some of the other community learnings that I've had, and kind of educate a lot of the kids about, hey, you can be financially independent, and this is how you can be a good member of your community. Think about the people that, own the barbershop that you might go to, or, own the grocery store that you might go to, or things like that. A lot of the smaller kind of Main Street storefronts. That's how I have kind of spun that. And I think that's a huge part of it, at least the American experience. So I got connected with them and just kept teaching and just kept teaching. And then one day I was recognized as one of the top volunteers, which I didn't even realize. And I just love doing it. So that's how the teaching bug is for me.
Thanks a lot for that context, right? So on your professional front, you have worked with so many amazing companies, monster aliens, robot zombies. Do you know what's the origin, why the company is named that?
So that is what I don't know, but what I'm gonna guess, knowing these guys, first of all, they're an amazing VFX company. So that's how they started.
Right.
And that's what I'm gonna assume they started. The VFX world, which I've had to learn a lot about in the last 6 months working with them. It's all about either character work or environment work. And now VFX is in everything. Every single film has VFX. Every television series has VFX. Indie films, documentaries, all this stuff, there's some element of VFX that goes into it. So they're either doing monsters and aliens and robots or zombies, or the background that's happening in any scene. And these guys are top tier. They punch above weight, meaning they're a pretty small shop, but they have produced work for like Netflix and Marvel and Warner Brothers and Paramount, up there next to like the Wedas of the world and the ILMs of the world, which are kind of your 5-star, mega powerhouses of VFX. So I started working with them because they started launching AI products. There was also a downturn in that industry, just like tech went through a downturn during the writer strike. People might remember Hollywood shut down for about 18 months and all work was frozen. No writers, no work, right? So that pipeline kind of started to shore up. And for a lot of VFX companies that were mid-size, they made one of two decisions. They either kind of just closed the doors for a little bit, or they pivoted into something else. And what these guys did, they pivoted into monetizing their AI tools that they'd already developed. They had hired some brilliant machine learning researchers and professors that are actually teaching machine learning at some prominent universities. And a lot of shortcuts that they were taking with VFX, where they'd have to render just thousands of shots to de-age someone, or render thousands of shots to try and do a better lip sync. They're like, oh, what if we made a tool from this? And what if we added it to our tool set? Then what if we just started selling it? And these are now startup ideas. And so again, they brought me in to kind of help cross the chasm because I'm a startup guy. And it's a lot of fun because I get to work with these guys that are making all of these shows that I watch. Everyone there is a cinephile like me. So we all love film and we can nerd out on that. But then everyone is also really passionate about these products. So LipDub AI is the one that does the lip sync, and Vanity AI is the one that does the de-aging. It's amazing stuff.
Right. Yeah. So, best of luck for that. I'm really happy that you're enjoying the work that you do. That's kind of a personal question. But, a lot of time I find people who are working for someone else, a lot of time they are not enjoying the work they do. Have that ever happened to you?
Yeah, for sure. You don't really get to pick and choose your leaders. And thankfully now that doesn't happen. Because also going fractional, you get to kind of pick and choose your clients, right? So if there's not good vibes, it's just not going to happen. But yeah, early in your career, and especially if anyone listening to this is younger and you're dealing with a boss or teammates that you just don't like, I started to get into the mindset because I had a lot of just really crappy kind of managers in a row. I got into the mindset of, okay, these people are teaching me what not to do. So I began to cobble together what my leadership was going to be like with that mindset, where I was like, okay, I'm sitting under someone or I'm working with someone that just isn't good and I know it. I'm going to isolate what I really don't like about it. And then I'm going to do the opposite when I get my chance. And that, maybe I just rationalized it. Maybe that was just me, trying to get to a gritty place where I could push through it, but it did kind of get me through. I was kind of just collecting an observance and saying like, okay, I'm not going to do that when I get my chance. And so that's how I've actually learned to lead better, is kind of by, knowing what not to do, and making sure I'm doing the inverse.
No, that's actually a great mindset to look at the tough situations. And to be honest, I face similar problems. And, luckily, even I looked at those things and I was thinking like, okay, so I started my career in a law firm, right? So as a lot of people may know, law firms are not the
A lot of
best.
egos.
Yeah, exactly. So, now I can't generalize the statement because I have worked for only one law firm. So, so what I say, like, I love my bosses to the core, and that's a fact. But when I was there, I saw a lot of things which I made a point that when I'm having my own firm, I'm not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for bringing that mindset. But what I wanted to kind of emphasize is that there's a difference between a demanding boss and an asshole boss.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
So this is something I learned later on, right? I like, so how do you distinguish between that, right? How do you realize that your boss is actually really demanding, making your job hell, but he's trying to teach you something, than just an asshole boss?
It comes down to one very delicate balance in my experience here, and it is separating the person from the issue. An asshole will say, hey, you did bad work, you suck, right? A demanding boss will say, hey, you did bad work, here's how you need to improve, here's how I'm going to get you there, what do you need, what's going on with you as a person. The person is good, the person that we brought in is worth teaching, the person that we have is worth developing, we care about you, even if you do really bad work, even, hey, turned in was shitty. Okay, we're going to get you there because we know the person that we have in this desk is worth our time to get them to the next step. Now, if you invest a ton of time and that person doesn't work out, the worst case you have is, hey, we have a bunch of history of us trying to help this person and we got to show them out. Maybe we made a bad decision in bringing them in. But if you do the other thing to a good person, you're going to get minimum out of them and they're going to run right for the door as soon as they can. So that to
Right.
me is a fine line between the asshole and the demanding boss. And it's fine to be demanding. As you can tell, I love a fast-paced startup environment. So
Yeah.
I demanding, but I like to inspire people to get there. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, well said. Well said. And this is something I think I read in a book. I think build something that would fly. That was the name of the book. So,
Yeah.
as a startup entrepreneur and as a marketer, you're interacting with so many people, and a lot of times you'll get a feedback. That the author said one thing is that if you're getting a feedback, if you're getting a criticism, and there's some respect attached to it, right? And the person who's trying to say you, trying to make you understand in a respectable way, definitely hear them, right? But if there's no respect attached to it, just ignore that. And this is something I also wanted to point out, because now everybody is on social media, right? And you put out the content, and there will be people who will just come in. Like, I have been criticized heavily a lot for my Indian accent. You probably will not believe, right? So there have been some nasty comments on YouTube on my Indian accent. And I was like, dude, I am Indian. So what
Yeah.
am I supposed to have? Right. But I get it. I get it. But see, that's one rule that I always abide by. If there's somebody is giving you criticism and there's some it is passed in a respectable way, definitely heed to them. But if
Yeah.
it isn't, just ignore it and move on.
Well, that's a case in point. So that negative feedback is, it's not separating the person from what they're hearing, which is
Right.
a person from India who is obviously speaking several dialects, and you
Right.
learned English and you're blogging in English and putting out content. It's like, if you think about all the work that this educated person went to produce this, and you're railing on them because they're not speaking your accent, the problem
Right.
is, so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I graduated as a lawyer, and I think this might inspire someone. I couldn't even speak a single line of English, right, without influency. So even when
Yeah.
I had to argue in moot courts or some courts, I used to write it down and just mug up, right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't long ago; it was like 10 years back. So a lot of people here in India struggle with the fact that they are not fluent in English. So I say to them that, it doesn't matter, you'll get there someday. And there are certain things that, which can help you. Definitely go and do that. But the point that I was trying to make here is that when I started watching American shows,
Mhm.
for like first 3 4 months, it took me time to understand your accent as well, right? To be honest,
Oh
like
yeah.
nothing wrong in you. There is a certain way that you guys speak, and like in the last couple of years, what have happened is my interest has gravitated towards British shows, right? Which I feel are not as appreciated as American shows. So there's a show called The Taskmaster. It's one of the best thing on television, and here in India, and I speak to a lot of people in US, they're just not aware of it. So again, when that happened, it took me 3 4 months to understand the British accent as well, right? It is difficult for anybody, right? I
It
understand that.
is. Oh yeah, and I'm still learning Spanish. So we speak Spanish fluently
Right.
in my house. My wife is a bilingual educator, and so she's our maestra who teaches us Spanish. That means teacher in Spanish. And there's certain levels, right? I'm now conversational and getting to the point where I think you're talking about is learning the nuances and the
Right.
phrases, all the different things of the language. And it's like, that's probably the toughest part, because it's breaking away from, oh, I can communicate, I can get what I need
Yeah.
done. And even if you're like speaking a broken language a little bit and maybe people aren't telling you, crossing that chasm to the next stage of, oh, I'm actually fluent and I sound like a native speaker at least, or I'm using the right words. And that is difficult in any language. And from what I hear, uh, from non-native English speakers, it's really difficult with our language because we have so many little one-off rules that drive
Right.
everyone crazy. So kudos to you for
Yeah.
learning, and
Yeah. And
for everyone
to be
here,
honest,
learn another language.
uh,
See how smart you are. Get
no,
humbled real quick.
To be honest, if you are an Indian, it's not that difficult. So I've tried to learn other language, any other language than English, and it is a challenge. But as you rightly said, that once you get to a working level, which is where I am right now, that it works. So then improving is actually one of the hardest things. So when I got
100%.
this feedback, and people with respect, because I'm interacting with a lot of clients there. And they are genuinely facing the problem. They're a lot of times they don't even communicate that, but I can read on their face. So now what I have done, I've hired a vocal coach who's neutralizing my accent. So I'm
Oh,
not trying, I'm trying to not have an American accent or a British accent, have a neutral accent. And that is
mm,
actually the tougher part, because things are working now. Taking out 1 hour every day to speak to my
mhm.
vocal coach, right,
Yeah,
is the difficult part. So that's again, I'll say that that's what distinguishes you from mediocre people. That once you
yes,
get to a working level, you don't stop learning.
exactly. Yeah, and I think if there's anything, or this podcast has taken an interesting turn, but if there's anything to really learn about experience, it is literally that.
Right.
In maintaining that level of curiosity to say, I still want to continue to learn. Back to kind of the leadership issue, that was the other piece of leadership philosophy that I had, was that, continually investing and assuming that we're all on some journey of change. Every single person out there, right, that I've ever worked with or coached, they're going through something, and that something might be
Right.
a delightful something. It might be, hey, I'm learning this new language and it's challenging,
Right.
and it's like, oh wow, but that's great. You're on this journey of change, right? And the 40 hours or whatever you end up spending doing work with me or with anyone else, it should also help facilitate that or make you feel good about getting to do that change, right? And it should be a win-win situation. The time that you spend at the company moves that company forward and change. It also enriches you and your family in some way. And like at best, it's a symbiotic relationship. At worst, you're getting beat down, and then that's gonna like ruin your time, right? Doing your vocal coaching or me doing my vocal coaching with my wife at home. You know, like we need to be on point at where we work in order to continue moving forward.
Absolutely, well said. So, I wanted to go into detail of each and every company you have been associated with, but as you said, we took a turn, right? I hope our listeners find it useful. But like
Yeah.
looking back, what was the most if I have to, if I ask you to share one special experience, what would that be?
Wow. That is a big question because I feel like at every place I probably had a big win and a big failure, which you think from, but I would say I learned most from like my big swings and misses. The biggest piece of experience I had was my first agency where um, I had a lot of great success, but I also had my biggest failures there. I was working on a project that was a massive like e-commerce overhaul. It was a seven-figure project. I had an offshore team. I had an onshore team that I'd hired, and we were just like rolling a stone up a hill. And it was one of those things where I had to dig deep and find ways to win after we missed like a massive deadline or the huge release came and the product wasn't up to code. And then what we ended up doing was just like, hey, just take it on the chin and keep going, right? Let's find a way to right this ship. And we did. I ended up just kind of changing my sleep schedule and my habits. I was single at the time, so where I could get up in the morning uh, at 6, get a handoff from my team in Bangalore and in
Yeah.
Hyderabad, uh, distill that to my onshore team, work with them, uh, go home, catch a 3-hour nap, come back, stay online at night and kind of do another handoff. And I was in like this weird kind of robotic Elon Musk like schedule where it was just like, let's win at all costs. But if I hadn't had kind of like that experience of knowing how far I could push myself, understanding that it was like, oh, this thing did not go as planned, but what are you going to do about it now? Um, and pushing through, making that successful in the end, like that really gave me some grit that I can always look back and say like, well, this isn't that bad, or
Yeah.
hey, I know how to push myself to this thing and get get something done if I really need to. So that's why now, like when I think about startups and the amount of work that we do for that, it's like, yeah, this really isn't that much, especially
Yeah.
when you get a huge win, when you see the success happen, when you see users kind of flooding in and actually using your stuff and turning into customers and long-term wins, like that feeling just will never go away. That's the biggest kind of thing that I can recall right now. There's a lot of other small and large wins and losses along the way, but I guess from an advice perspective, if anyone's listening to this, it's maybe think about like what you're really learning from either a big win or a big loss, and don't be afraid to lean into it or admit it or just say like, oh yeah, this is my hugest failure. I had read something really interesting where one company had like this club where people would share their biggest failures, like during like a lunch and learn or something like that.
Right.
And it bonded everyone because everyone has like one major, like embarrassing story, at least. It could be in school, could be at work, doesn't matter. But like sharing that failure that a lot of people keep as a secret, like really bonds people because you're like, oh my God, I did that too, or that's my worst nightmare or something, right? Like they ended up forming a club where people would just share their stories and it stayed in the room, you know, of the other people, but they became like lifelong friends through it. And these were just people at work, and I'm not sure who came up with it, where I read it, but if you're looking for a bonding experience, especially over Zoom, try that one.
Okay, that's a interesting suggestion. Thanks a lot for sharing that. And so when we were talking before the podcast, you are a family man, right? So one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
problems I feel a lot of people struggle with is that once you are having a challenging professional life, how to not let that affect your family life, right? So how do you disconnect when things are not going well in your professional life? What is your tips and tricks on that?
Communication and compartmentalization. So the communication part is something that I had to learn to grapple with because I was a lone wolf for a long time. And I kind of am like that. Like I problem solve best like on my own. Like I'll go and take a walk and like, you know, have one of those moments and come back with fresh ideas. So learning to communicate to my partner during all of that and just, you know, telling her like, hey, I'm going through this or that is happening. Take it easy on me, or I might be moody, or I'm going to need to go, you know, run this off on a hike or something like that. That's key. And not just that, but it's the compartmentalization factor too. I've gotten really good over the years, and this is through years of therapy, meditation, all of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, do the work if you're listening to this. The work helps you when like you go off your path. If you're feeling really good and you're like, oh, I don't need therapy anymore, or I don't need a system to like keep myself guarded. The systems exist for when things go bad.
Right.
You know, that's really the measure of what a champion is. Can you still make shots when you're losing, right? So that's what I'm saying here. So the compartmentalization stuff is what I'm saying. When things are bad, how well can you say, okay, I'm gonna go through some kind of exercise to close that part off, pivot, and then now I'm in dad mode, or now I'm in mom mode, or now I'm in parent mode, or whatever you need to do to kind of clear that out. You might not be 100% present. You might be 70% present or something, but try to get there and try to build systems to help you to get there. Those are the two pieces there. Let people know what's going on and then try to do that.
Right. Well, thanks a lot for sharing that. And one of the things I wanted to check on you, so over in here in India, I think things are improving, but there's still a lot of stigma attached with seeking mental help, right? So what would be your how to tackle that stigma?
I feel like, so I can't speak for India, but I know in the States now, it is becoming a lot more common for people to admit they're in therapy and for people to say that they're in therapy. And now, you know, you hear ads all the time about things like BetterHelp, and in different apps and services and platforms that promote this. So it's becoming less of a stigma. I think the stigma, it certainly was there. I am African American, and in my community, it used to be prominent where people would say, "Oh no, we don't go to therapy. We have community, or we go to the barbershop and we talk or something like that." But that might not be as true as the colloquialism states. So the stigma is just admitting that there's nothing wrong with it, and having someone to talk to help work through stuff is really important. It's kind of shifting it from I'm sick, I need to go to the doctor, and this is a preventative, care situation where I'm exercising to prevent myself from getting heart disease.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking with a therapist to equip me with the tools for when life gets hard or my mental health declines or something like that. That's how I would say going about it.
Absolutely. So let's play the rapid fire round very quickly.
All right.
I know you have to go. So we have a couple of minutes left. Let's utilize it. So first, coffee or tea?
Double espresso every morning.
Favorite app on your phone?
It's YouTube.
One book you recommend to everyone?
It's funny. I just recommended this the other day. Seth Godin's The Dip. It is old.
Right.
It is a quick read. I'm sure everyone's read it. You could knock it out in like 40 minutes. It's the little book that helps you know when to quit. I probably use that on a monthly basis.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Oh man, I did not think this through. Probably someone like I would want to meet someone controversial just to see if they lived up to like that. I know people talk about people like Winston Churchill, and a lot of people knew him. I mean, it wouldn't be him, but it would be a figure that was controversial because I just want to see if it's true, right?
Right.
These people that you hear about just being either kind of not really tyrants, but just misunderstood. So sorry, I don't have a ring to it, but
So do you want to meet Hitler?
not that controversial. I feel like that would be a quick meeting. Can I bring it back? No. But someone more like kind of misunderstood. Like I think about like a Benjamin Franklin or someone who was
Right.
just very witty and wry and like just known for being kind of an imp, but also got a lot done and was respected. Kind of these people that you love to hate and kind of work with, but they're like, but like they got so much done that you kind of deal with them. And it's like, those are the most interesting people to me because they have like this duality about them where it's like, were they really like that? Or were they, so yeah.
So probably you can answer the next time we call you on our podcast.
I will follow. Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Ben, for coming on Yes Users and sharing your story.
Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun. Great chat, Avinash.
And there you have it, folks, a fascinating journey through the mind of a marketing innovator. Ben Hoehn's experiences remind us that success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder, but about constant adaptation, learning from failures, and finding ways to merge our passions with our professional lives. Whether you are a seasoned marketer, a budding entrepreneur, or simply someone looking to navigate the complex world of modern business, there are valuable lessons to be gleaned from Ben's story. Remember, as Ben highlighted, it's not just about the wins, but how we handle the losses that truly shapes our career and character. So keep pushing, keep learning, and don't be afraid to share your failures. They might just be the key to your next big success. Thanks for tuning in to Yes Users. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who could use some marketing wisdom. Until next time, this is your host, Avinash, signing off.